Let's add this up. How many have we sold this week? Let's write that down and calculate that and leave that there. That's not what we're doing is about. It's about sharing and building among ourselves and operating as a family. And someone enlightened me last week the difference between a community and a family. We have a conscious community, but we don't have a conscious family. The difference is communities all live in the same geographical location, but they're not necessarily responsible for each family. You see, they're only responsible for their own family, but they all live together and inhabit some particular region or some particular environment. But a family is a responsible relationship between entities of the same bloodline, of the same inheritance. You see the point I'm making? Of the same lineage. So we need more of a familial, a family type interaction among ourselves to change the condition that's going on in our community. Because family means accountability and it means responsibility. Community doesn't mean responsibility. It means that there's just some level of communication. That's all you need for a community. It's communication, commune among people. And that's enough for a community. But we need a family relationship in our so-called community. If we went from communities to expanded and extended families, we would solve at least 99% of the problems that exist in our community. Because we would feel responsible for each and every individual and each and every human being that's walking around out there. So we want to elevate people's consciousness to a level of family by showing them that there's one common ancestor. There's one common race, one common group, one common root of which we all come from. If we can just have them realize that, then the fundamental basis for familyhood can be established. And that's the purpose of our DVD ministry. The messages of Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad, Marcus Garvey, Noble Drew Ali, is to awaken them to see that, wait a minute, we're all one. All these divisions do not exist. What we're doing is, if we want the supreme benefits, then we have to come together as a group. We have to unify. And we are not going to be able to do that until we awaken them to familyhood. And that's the point of historical reference points. That's the point of giving them that information about the knowledge of their ancestors and their history, so they can say, wait a minute, this is my brother. Not my neighbor, but my brother. Not my neighbor, but my sister. And when we establish those type of relationships, it becomes more humanitarian. It becomes more loving and caring and compassionate. Some black people don't even look at people as their neighbor. They look at them as potential consumers. That's black people. When they see somebody, they say, that's a potential consumer. That's somebody I can market to. It never occurred to them that this is an individual of life, an organic living being who has a valuable life that needs to be expanded as far as it possibly can so that that life can ultimately be a contribution to the community. That never hits them. This is a consumer. This is my neighbor. And then you got some people walking around calling each other fools and Vicks. What up, fool? What up, dog? So we've never reached a humanitarian way of perceiving one another. And as long as we perceive each other in inhumane ways, then we'll constantly act inhumane towards one another. But that's not the purpose of this lecture. So I'm going to go into that another time. But I felt like I did need to hit on that. I did need to hit on that. But the conversation of this lecture is called Who is God? I need to hit on that. Yeah, it's recording. The fundamental purpose of this lecture is who is God? Now I have to deal on God. For a while I got away from the religious concepts and dealing with religion and dealing with that, because you see in my last lectures I'm talking about community building, responsibility, and there's some spiritual concepts. I did a lecture talking about Barack Obama, the myths and logics of mental illness and psychology. But I stepped away from really talking about God and getting into religious concepts and religious views. I tried to back up from that a little bit and deal with more what I considered to be at the time more pertinent issues dealing with us in our community. But I started off, my original beginning of building and putting out this information was dealing with spiritual concepts, dealing with the reality and the existence of God. That's where I started off at. But I developed myself to a point of saying, wait a minute, let's see how we can apply this knowledge, wisdom, and understanding to community and nation building. But I think that some of us need to go back to that. Because how a person sees God is the fundamental basis of their reality. And a house is as strong as the foundation on which it stands. And if their foundation is God, no matter what you add or what concepts you share with them, unless you change the fundamental nature of their reality, you have done nothing. You have just prescribed a medication. They still headed towards kidney failure. Do you understand the point I'm making? Unless you challenge the fundamental basis of their reality, there can be no permanent change. So I can tell you about black love and black nationalism, but if you still believe in a white God and a white Jesus, or you believe in an Arab deity, that God, when you think of God, you think of an Arab in the sky. Do you understand the point I'm making? Then there's no way you're going to have the real loyalty from a person who has mentally developed at a point of identifying with their own people. So no matter what we tell you, no matter what we try to invoke people to do, or bring them to do, if the fundamental nature of their reality is not changed, they're still perceiving reality on a destructive level. So we cannot get away from the issue of dealing with who is God to them. That question will, how they see God will determine how they will react in very significant circumstances. Do you see the point I'm making? If you believe God is white, when a white man comes to you, that is your God. You will bow down to him. You will smile, tap-toe, jigaboo, whatever you have to do, because your God is before you. So how you see God is ultimately going to determine how you react and respond in certain given circumstances. So we have to deal with the reality of what God is. And not just God from the perspective of dealing with Europeans. That's very limited. From the perspective of God with realizing your human potential. Because if you really have the concept of a mystery God, or some superstitious reality of God, or mystery gods outside of yourself, there's no way you're going to maximize your own human potential, because you're limited to what those entities that you do not understand or have any knowledge of or about can do for you. You're limited to what these beings, of whom you have no knowledge of, don't understand, never seen. They're mysterious. They work in mysterious ways. You have no knowledge of where they're at, what they're going to do, and that's what you're depending on when you get up tomorrow morning. That's what's going to determine what comes from your day. So think about that. Some people saying they worship many gods, and they say they worship many gods along with the ancestors. They got about 13 or 14 different gods. And they have to consult with these different gods before they do anything. So if you're talking to that person, and you're trying to motivate them and elevate them to some conscious level of maximizing their potential, you're not even talking to anyone. There's nobody there. Because they have to deal with all these different gods and entities before they can come to any decisive conclusion about doing anything. So no one's home, if you understand the point that I'm making. They're not driving the car. They're a passenger in their own vehicle. And they have put these deities and these entities, or these superstition beings, in the front seat. So you think you're talking to them, but what you're saying to them it doesn't even matter. It's irrelevant. Because ultimately they're depending on some mysterious hocus pocus. You see, we're making to determine how things are going to manifest for them in their life. So until you can challenge the fundamental basis of that reality, you're not even communing with that individual. There's no hope for progressive evolution with group organization or on an individual level if the fundamental nature of those illusions are not challenged. So in this lecture, I planned on scientifically and accurately and conclusively challenging those illusions in people's minds. I'm going to start off with the Christian doctrine. People say, well, you don't pray, you don't believe in that there is a creator or there's a God. And I use the word God. Let me clarify that. When I use the word God, I don't mean what the average person is walking around the street talking about when they say God. The creator of the universe. So if I consider myself to be God, I'm not identifying myself with what people consider to be the creator of the universe. Yahweh, Allah, Jehovah, with how they see those beings. Your average person. Now that's some enlightened people. The Sufis, who understand that Allah is all that exists, all pervasive, everywhere. Whether you look to the east or west, there's the presence of Allah. Allah is near to you in your own jugular vein. To that person, we're talking about the same being. But to your average person who's talking about something that's so far outside of their human consciousness, I'm not talking about them. When I say God, I'm not talking about who they're talking about. But if you talk to a Sufi, we're talking about the same entity, the same being, the same energy. Do you see the point I'm making? And I'll give you an example, a Sufi story. And I'm not going to quote this accurately. Some Sufis going to hear this. They're going to clarify it to people. As I said, it's been so long since I studied Sufism. But it was a story about Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him.